Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. It's cold and snowy outside, so today I'm inside working on the computer, and I don't spend all my time just making YouTube videos. I actually use the computer also to keep track of how our farm's doing. If you watched the video I put up a couple weeks ago about making a sustainable family income from a small farm, you saw me stress how important it is to keep data. And for me, keeping data means taking care of this computer work every day or every couple days and entering every item we sell in our phone software whenever we go to market. So I want to walk you through today how we keep those records. Before I get into this whole thing, please subscribe to our channel. There's a little button down here on the right, not on here, but down on your screen, and a bell notification so that you'll know when we put up new videos. Well, obviously I'm dressed for my accounting jobs today. I have my accounting shirt on with button-down collar, the fancy sleeves, not the regular t-shirts I wear around the farm. I asked Hillary if I should put some deodorant on before I did this video, and she said, it's probably not really necessary. But I've been working with the pigs all morning, so I gotta tell you, I smell pretty bad. You might even be able to smell it through the camera. Let me show you step one of our accounting system. It's this. The accordion file. You can get these for $9 or $10 at Walmart or what have you. This holds 2 years of records for us. So I've populated the first year. This will be next year. We keep our records on a tax year basis. When we started out, I thought, well, we should keep them differently than a tax year basis because when you're growing meat on a farm, you usually grow throughout the spring, summer, and fall, and then it takes until the next spring to sell down what you've grown sometimes. So I started out keeping records from May through May, and it just got too confusing for tax purposes. So I quit that, and I went to tax year, January through December. So that's what is in this accordion file, January through November now. So that's the accordion file. Things don't go in this accordion file until they go into Excel. So I'll show you that next because that's kind of step two. First, we'll review the sustainable farm income spreadsheet, which I briefly mentioned in the creating a sustainable farm income video. This is the spreadsheet, and it's divided into two main sections. The first is income and the second is expenses, right? It's probably like day one of accounting school. We've got our 5 farm enterprises at the top under expenses. Eggs from layer chickens, broilers, turkeys, pork, and beef. The number of each animal that we're growing. How much profit per animal that we make, and multiplication out, and it becomes total income. In review, the first year that we farmed, I kept careful track of every expense related to every farm enterprise and kept track of every sale that we made so that I knew expenses and income for that bunch of animals that we grew. When we were done selling those animals, I knew profit per animal, and to create a sustainable farm budget, I was able to plug in that number and then multiply it out by how many animals we needed to grow to meet our annual living expenses and create a sustainable income. But you have to include the second part. Not only how many animals do you grow, but what are your expenses? And to get an idea of those, I had to wait until the second year that we farmed to get an idea of what the right ratio of both overhead expenses here and infrastructure expenses here were. So by the second year of farming, I had numbers for farm insurance, what market dues should cost us, how much fuel we were using, and how many miscellaneous things came up per year, oil changes and consumables that we had to buy other than what was categorized above. And I also had a good idea of infrastructure. Now, infrastructure can be widely variable. Some years you may choose to purchase a whole bunch of new equipment, and that really inflates the infrastructure number. But to work on a budget, you have to have a number that you use for each of these. So I picked what I thought was an average and put them down for each of these items: bedding, fencing, construction materials, equipment, and miscellaneous. Once I had those expenses categorized, and both overhead and infrastructure kind of whole farm expenses, they aren't related to expenses assigned to any individual enterprise, I could take them off of the income number and come up with the big bottom line, which is net total income. That's what we need to make as a family to support ourselves. It's a really simple spreadsheet, but it's very important. So as we go through the year and I'm thinking, well, can I purchase this piece of equipment that I think I need? I can look at our budget and say, I've already used all of my equipment money, or maybe I'll go over equipment money for this year a little bit because I really need this piece of equipment. In any case, I'm making an informed decision. I'm not shooting in the dark. I know where I stand in terms of where our budget numbers need to be versus what I think I need to buy for the farm. So let's leave this dinky little spreadsheet and go to the giant spreadsheet. Down here, here it is. And let's go all the way over. There's a whole bunch of tabs on the bottom, but the summary tab is the one to start with. This is the at-a-glance view of how our farm is doing. And on January 1st of any given year, it looks like this. And as soon as we start to sell items or accumulate expenses, it gets populated. So every day on from January 1st, we know if we're in the red, if we're in the black, not only as a whole farm, but for each enterprise of the farm. So here are our farm enterprises. We've got our layer hens, egg income and expenses, layer profit. Our meat chickens, broilers, expenses, income, profit. You see the pattern. Turkeys, pigs, cattle, and then we have two farm-wide big expense categories: overhead expenses and infrastructure expenses, and I'll explain those a little later. And then at the bottom we have kind of the big deal number: total income, total expenses, and total profit. If you go down to the bottom of the sheet, you see that there's a whole bunch of tabs laid across the bottom, and they keep going. These tabs hold the information for each one of these line items on this. And this number is updated automatically when I put the numbers in these tabs. So the whole thing works automatically. If I put in an infrastructure expense, say I buy a tire for a piece of equipment, it'll automatically show up on this summary sheet as far as the totals go. I'll walk you through these tabs at the bottom. They're pretty simple. Egg income, as with any of the income tabs on the bottom here, whenever we sell eggs, we put the day we sold them and the total dozens sold and the total amount of money. Expenses is organized into categories. So for layers, we have the chicks that we purchase every year, day-old chicks, the cost for that. Feed, for our layer chicks, we use feed by the gravity wagon load, which is 3 tons for us. Feed expenses. Miscellaneous expenses, which for layers tend to be labels for the egg cartons and then the cartons themselves. It totals it all up automatically and tosses it back into that summary sheet. So that's layer expenses. Broilers are similar to layers. Income, again, whenever we sell something, we put it in here. Expenses, same sorts of categories. Chick purchase, feed. We have shrink bags for the meat chickens because after we butcher them, we package them that way. Miscellaneous tends to be propane for firing the scalder for plucking the chickens, and labels for the packaged birds. Turkeys, same thing. Turkey income, turkey expenses, chick purchase, feed, shrink bags, miscellaneous, propane again to fire the scalder. Pig income, pig expenses. Big pig expenses, of course, are feed and butcher costs. Butcher costs are a huge percentage of our pig expenses, almost as much as it costs us to grow them, it seems like. And again, we buy feed by the gravity wagon load to get a bulk discount on that, which is, incidentally, we pay about 25% less for bulk feed than we would for bagged feed. So the investment in all the gravity wagons that we have paid off within the first year. It's something I'd highly recommend doing if you can use the feed fast enough that it doesn't go stale, which is particularly an issue in the summer months. The warmer the temperature, the quicker the feed goes stale. In the winter, it's like you're keeping the feed in a refrigerator or freezer, so it's not as big a deal. So anyway, that's my little feed spiel. Let's scroll across the bottom tabs. We come to cattle. Again, same sort of income deal. Expenses. Cattle expenses are pretty varied. We don't have any feed costs. We do make hay, and that costs us money, but those expenses get rolled into infrastructure and overhead expenses. They're too tough to tease out of those, so I've always just kept them rolled in with that. The cost for fuel, the cost for equipment. A lot of the equipment it gets used for multiple farm enterprises, so I don't pull that stuff apart. Cattle expenses, so we have our registration association dues, the American Dexter Cattle Association. We do genetic testing on our cattle. As part of registration, we've got vet bills for medications mainly related to dehorning calves, mineral that we buy, and butcher costs, which for beef are a much smaller percentage of the big scheme of things than they are for pigs. And that does it for cattle expenses. Now down to the two big tabs, overhead and infrastructure expenses. And this is the way I break down overhead and infrastructure. And it's kind of loose the way I do it. To me, overhead expenses are anything that is quickly consumed. It's like putting gas in your car. That's an overhead expense because you're going to burn that gas within a week or 2 weeks probably. Those quick consumed things go into overhead expenses. Things like farm insurance, and we got to pay the bill every quarter for farm insurance. Electricity costs, again, immediately consumed. Cell phone bills, we use our cell phones for farm business and for putting in our purchases on Square at the farmer's market, which wind up being imported into this software, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Our market dues, we pay both an annual membership fee for the Ithaca Farmers Market, and we pay a per diem fee to sell every day we're there. Fuel gets divided into three categories. There's over-the-road fuel that we put in the truck and the van. There's tractor fuel, which is off-road fuel. We get a tax break for that when we file our taxes, so we keep those expenses separate. And then heating fuel costs, which for us is just the propane for my workshop to heat it in the winter when I'm working in there. This overhead tab gets probably half populated with the miscellaneous expenses. So you see the accordion file that I just showed you. Motor oil for changing the oil in vehicles, chainsaw parts, welding and cutting torch things, solder. These are just the consumable things that we use on the farm every day. They all get put in here. So if we move over to infrastructure expenses, you'll see that infrastructure expenses are things that depreciate over time. And the first one's a weird one on the overhead, or the infrastructure expenses. Bedding. So we use bedding mainly for the chickens, and it's this flake bedding that we buy to line the nesting boxes and to put in the winter house. But to me, that's an infrastructure expense because that's nutrients we're bringing to the farm. We're composting that and spreading it as manure where it benefits all the enterprises. So I always put bedding purchases underneath infrastructure expenses. Fencing, pretty self-explanatory. Construction materials, lumber, nails, screws, hardware, that sort of stuff, concrete. Equipment, whenever I buy a piece of equipment, it goes in this because that piece of equipment will be used for years and years, and It's something that you can depreciate over time. Although I like to say I buy my equipment fully depreciated, the accountant actually puts in a depreciation factor. And that's something else about these spreadsheets that I haven't mentioned yet, is the way they're laid out. They're kind of Schedule F ready, which is the tax schedule you use for farm income and expenses. It's not exactly the same categories as Schedule F1, but it's in such a form where it's easy for our accountant to pull out all of the financial data that they need at the end of the year to do our taxes. I just email it off to them, and it's pretty much all I need to give them to do our taxes at this point. Anyway, under equipment, it's not only the equipment purchase, but it's when I buy parts for the equipment. Because, once again, those parts are not like fuel. You don't consume them right away. Now they're a piece of the machine and they last years. So equipment purchases and parts purchases go in here, but not oil changes. Miscellaneous, again, that winds up being a big thing in the infrastructure category. Kind of miscellaneous things: feed carts, hand trucks, 5-gallon buckets, poultry feeders and waterers. Again, they don't go to that specific enterprise, they go to infrastructure. Now, if I went out and bought 5 Plasan drinkers in 1 year, it would, if I put that in the meat bird tab, that's not really expense I need to absorb in 1 year. Those drinkers will last 5 years minimum. So it goes into infrastructure, where it's along with the things that last a long time. So you get the gist of the difference between overhead and infrastructure expenses. Overhead gets consumed immediately. Infrastructure gets used over the course of years. The last tab on this spreadsheet is income by market. And this is how we track how we make, or how much we make on any given day at market. We've got it organized at the top: Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays, which are our 3 markets, by week of the year, because we use this form over and over again, and then we populate it with the date of the market and the total that we made at that market. It adds it up for a weekly income, and then at the bottom we get averages for each market and average per week. So this is a nice way to tell at a glimpse how you're doing as far as selling it to markets. Selling at markets are not our only sales. We sell quite a bit from the farm, and that doesn't wind up on this sheet. But market to market, year to year, is something we like to look at. Did we make more at this market this year than we did last year? The information from this schedule or spreadsheet doesn't feed back into the rest of the spreadsheet. It's kind of a standalone tab. It's not reflected in the numbers anywhere else. So I'll summarize by going back to the summary tab. If you look at each of these categories, that corresponds back to the original sheet, this one, where we have each of our 5 enterprises on the farm. So I can look at the first sheet. It's not easy to toggle back and forth for me here. See what our profit is for the year so far on each enterprise. Look at our sustainable farm income sheet and say, oh, we hit our target for this year, or no, we need to grow more of this animal to hit our income target for this year. It makes it really easy. Now, as I said, one of the key things to doing it this way is you have to be religious about putting in the numbers. I don't let things accumulate. If I get a receipt, it goes on my mail pile. It doesn't go off my mail pile till it's put in the software, and once it's in the software, it goes into the accordion file, and I'm done with it. So all that information is then living in here. And like I said, I do this once a day, once every 2 days. I don't let it get away from me. Now, the last thing I want to show you, the last piece of software anyway, is Square. Square is how we determine all of our income at the farm. Whenever we sell anything, it goes into Square. The Square is a point of sale system if you're not familiar with it. It has an app that goes on my phone. This is the cash register on Square. And what we have on here are all of our items. Every single cut of meat, that we sell is on here. And when we sell something, we just hit it and we put in the number, and then it goes through like a cash register, you total it up, and it gets entered into the Square software. This is also the way that we take credit cards. It's got a little reader that fastens on the bottom of it. And some people use it only for that, for taking credit cards. But once we started exploring the options for using Square as a sort of data manager for all of our sales, we found out it's really powerful. So that's what we use it for at market. Hillary and I both have our phones in our hand. Whenever we sell something at market and we're putting in the numbers, we never miss a sale that way. As well as on the farm. Whenever we sell something, it goes in here. Really religious about that too. Once we get home from market, then we get to the other side of Square, which is the dashboard. And the dashboard is the thing that slices and dices the data for us. So let me pull that up. You get it via the internet. It lives on the cloud. Square is not only a cash register app, but it's also, they've tried to expand. So they have a scheduling app that's part of this, and they're always trying to loan me money and bugging me about that kind of stuff. But as you probably know by now, I don't borrow money, so I kind of ignore that. You can populate these little squares in Square with different reports that you want to see. That's up here. So you can see the ones I've checked are the ones that you get to see, which is all of them, I guess. I don't use this screen too much. It's nice to see total sales quickly, but the screen that I use in Square is this reports button over here. And so when you get to this screen, let me change it to a day here where we sold stuff, which would be, let's say, Saturday, which was a good day at farmers market. We've got a sales summary on the top here, which shows how much you sold by hour. And the blue line is this year, the gray line is last year, which is really cool to see. Did the market sort of move at the same pace? Was it busy in the morning or the afternoon? And how did it compare to last year? So that's a nice summary. There's really only a couple tabs that I use frequently on this. And that, by far the most highly used one is this categories tab. So again, here we see our 5 farm enterprises: beef, chicken, eggs, pork, turkey. And we see our gross sales for the day for each category. That's what goes back into that Excel spreadsheet. Remember, there was the broiler chicken income tab. For that day, I would put in the number from Square that we sold. This makes it really easy to do the Excel spreadsheet. I don't have to deal with paper receipts at market and writing down the prices of everything that I sold because it automatically comes in. When I get home from market and I pull up this chart on Square, it takes me about 10 minutes to go through it and put all the numbers into the Excel spreadsheet, and then I'm done for that day. So that's category sales. The other tab that I open up a lot is sales trends. So again, you see this graph of what you sold today versus the same day last year. But on the bottom, there's the week compared to the week last year, and then the year compared to last year, 2019 compared to 2018. And the big thing that I use with this chart is I can see whether I beat the sales from the corresponding month last year, which is kind of an incremental way of measuring farm progress. You always want to beat last year's number. So that's Square. I mean, it couldn't be simpler to use. Again, it's something I figured out by myself, which that says something. I didn't have to go and look at a bunch of videos or read a manual. It's so intuitive that you can figure it out yourself. It's easy to populate those item fields that I showed you on the phone, you know, all the different cuts of meat. I did that one morning at market in about 20 minutes when I was early and didn't have anything else to do. It's really easy. If you put a piece of paper in front of me with a whole bunch of numbers on it, there's very few things in this world that'll make my eyes glaze over more quickly. These numbers are kind of alive to me though, because I know what each one is associated with in terms of the work that Hillary and I and the kids do here. And I couldn't imagine running a farm without doing this, because I would be completely in the dark. I wouldn't know whether to invest in, say, the gravity wagons example. I wouldn't know what our most profitable enterprise is. By the way, that's broiler chickens. And I wouldn't know what our least profitable enterprise, and by the way, that's pigs. Knowing that, I know which enterprise that we should put the most effort into. Obviously, it should be the most profitable one that we put most of our effort into. And on the other hand, I know which enterprises we should be the leanest with in terms of what expenses we accumulate. I know that for the pigs, we need to be very careful about our expenses. That's not to say that we should cut corners, but we need to make sure that what we buy for the pigs are things that we really need. So I hope this sheds some light on the normally very boring world of farm numbers and shows how important they are to keeping your farm going. Once again, if you have any questions or I missed something or you didn't follow me on one point, my email's open. It's down in the video description. Feel free to comment on this video with any questions. And if you do it a different way that works well for you, I'd like to know about that too, because I'm not saying that this is the world's best system. It just happens to be the easiest system that I could come up with myself. So there's probably better ones out there. Let me know if you got one. Thanks. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.